Rock and stone, everyone!
Rock and stone forever! Mission.
What in the ever-living name of fuck? How long have you been doing this? Rock Galactic might have one of the strongest core concepts and executions I've seen in quite some time. The premise for this game is pretty simple. You're an employee at a deep space mining company tasked with incredibly mundane objectives in a variety of procedurally generated caves. You play as one of 4 classes kitted out with their own unique tool to traverse the various forms of terrain you'll encounter, and that's it. Oh, and it turns out this is one of the most hostile planets in the system, so you're just trying not to get your ass chewed off while working your 9 to 5. It might sound like I'm selling this game short, but that simplicity is really where it shines. The joy of this game comes from working together with your team to not only survive in combat, but work towards completing your objectives out of combat. To get a better frame of reference, here's a more detailed summary of what you'll be doing. Every mission starts off with you being dropped into the previously mentioned procedurally generated caves. From there, you just slowly work your way through the objectives, which range from simple material gathering, killing enemies, or needing to defend something. There are a few variations of these, but that's kind of the essence of what you do, outside of a few more unique missions. While you're collecting whatever you need for your mission, you'll likely be stripping the place clean of materials like gold and nitra. Nitra is used to call in resupply pods, which are your only way of restocking mid-mission, and gold or any other minerals you find are just used for upgrades after the mission. However, these caves aren't just a series of narrow hallways with low ceilings. There's gonna be chasms, there's gonna be massive vertical expanses with resources all the way up in the ceiling, and there's gonna be plenty of rooms you'll see, but aren't quite sure how you get to. This is where each of the 4 classes comes in. Armed with their own traversal tool, they can help the team get around these caves with such ease. Each tool excels in its own field and can't just be used as a one-size-fits-all situation, so coordinating their use properly will make things demonstrably easier. But like all menial jobs, it's never smooth sailing, and every now and then you have to deal with small packs or massive hordes of glyphids demanding to speak to your manager to file a noise complaint. Unfortunately, the only thing they have to write it with is your blood. This is where the second half of these characters come in, because these weapons are definitely not for show. Each class has their role in combat primarily dictated by the strengths and weaknesses of their weapons. These shortcomings that each class has are very apparent against the roster of enemies, so in order to not crumble, y'all have to try and focus on what your class does best. This dynamic that classes have both in and out of combat is absolutely delightful. So to get a better idea of what you have to work with, I'll go into each class some more. First up is the Gunner. This absolute unit refuses to carry a primary that weighs less than 50 pounds and a sidearm with enough stopping power to shatter bones. His, to be precise. Each class weapons will generally follow a trend of how they function to keep the class in line with the others. In this case, Gunner's primaries are all about having massive sustained fire and high damage, but his damage takes time to ramp up and is only situationally good at range. For reference of what this looks like, his starting primary is a minigun, which is a short delay before any shots are fired. Its base accuracy is terrible, but quickly improves with sustained fire and can eventually become pretty accurate. All of the different weapons in the SAM slot will generally follow the same theme, but shift over what they try and accomplish. His autocannon trades accuracy at range and single target for better clearing power due to its explosive rounds, and immediate damage with its static accuracy and no delay before shots. It still does have a fire rate spin up, but it can at least start shooting immediately. The secondaries generally try and make up for his range not being very immediate while providing very strong burst damage. His heavy revolver is capable of landing some pretty nasty hits at quite a range, but has a high spread recovery and only 4 rounds at base, so you need to make sure you land those shots. His alternative is more forgiving, with it being a burst fire that has quicker stability, but you have to dedicate yourself to the shot a little bit more, and the spread can make it deal less damage overall at range by missing or hitting armor. His combat tool is a shield generator, which is a nifty little device that constantly regenerates your shields and makes the enemies run away while blocking projectiles coming from the outside. Overall, he's a great sustained fighter once he picks up, but can have some trouble once you start to lose ground, and a slow movement speed while firing makes him very susceptible to range damage. His traversal tool is the zipline gun. You don't get many, but effective use of these things is great. This allows you to shoot a zip line at any point, creating a permanent line that you can slowly glide your way between. This tool is a great anchor for traveling across pits or going up and down sheer cliff faces. They also have some nice combat potential since the vast majority of enemies in this game are melee, and while you do move very slowly on this thing, you still move just fast enough to avoid the ranged enemies on the occasion. You can still be knocked off, so you gotta watch out for those ranged enemies. Up next is the Engineer. This guy can absolutely lock down the battlefield with some pretty powerful weaponry and even control how enemies move to his advantage, assuming he has the time to set that up. His weapons are generally quite powerful, but are on the lower efficiency side, and that's mostly because you're expected to use different parts of your arsenal depending on the situation, as opposed to Gunner, who can use his primary so long that by the time everyone completely ran out of ammo, I still haven't even touched my secondary. His primaries generally don't have the best clear by themselves, and they definitely have some trouble with range, but they make up for that by being pretty solid all-around weapons. His secondaries, on the other hand, are all localized war crimes with how powerful they can be, but they are limited in ammo quite substantially. You will pretty much only use these when there's something you don't want to see, or a lot of things you really don't want to see. And while I didn't talk about the grenades on the Gunner because they were honestly very simple, Engineer has some amazing choices. He gets a decoy that can distract enemies for a while, or a proximity mine that can go off several times before depleting. They're both great for holding a line. His combat tool is a turret, which is very powerful and comes with a hearty supply of ammo. This thing will be the primary reason you don't hemorrhage ammo during hordes, it will also protect you from getting swarmed, and will help with enemies at a range. As good as Engineer is, his primaries all have either slow fire rate, high recoil, or a weird lock-on mechanic that makes it harder to deal with getting swarmed. Those tiny swarmers can be a huge pain in the ass if you don't have thorns to make them instantly kill themselves, so thankfully you have a turret to help you with that. His traversal tool is the platform gun. It shoots platforms. The end. But really, this actually has a lot going on for it. It's kind of crazy. Ignoring the basics like making stairs along walls or shooting platforms at really high mineral deposits for scouts to get out, you can get really creative with this. First, they have two important upgrades to note, taking reduced fall damage and making it so enemies don't walk on them. The former is straightforward. It's super helpful to just leave platforms near large drops just in case, because this thing seriously increases the distance you can fall without taking damage. But the latter upgrade allows you to directly control where the bugs will and won't walk, up to a point. This game tries its best to be anti-cheese, and if there's physically no way for bugs to get to you, they'll just start to ignore mechanics if necessary. But with this upgrade, you can lay platforms along walls and floors to provide a protective cover around you while also funneling enemies into a specific direction. You can get so creative with these things that even now, I'm still finding new applications for a gun that's sole function is to shoot forbidden pancakes. Engineer really is a monster if you know how to abuse his arsenal to the fullest, which is why it's especially funny that one of the most annoying things to deal with as Engineer are these fucking ants. Thankfully, Driller is the complete opposite. He is a simple man with a simple mission to turn everything into a smoothie. The world, enemies, his teammates. Driller does not care, and your only option is to accept that. His arsenal of primaries revolves around short-range weapons that apply statuses and can provide some support in some way. They may or may not include a metric fuckload of damage, but that depends on his primaries since they vary more than the other classes. His secondaries try to resolve his crippling lack of range in less than spectacular ways. The starter is literally just a pistol. It's the all-reliable with nothing special but some good range. Your other is kind of the opposite, where it stacks every unique mechanic it can find, but it can also be used to mine from a distance with a fancy upgrade, so that's nice too. His combat tool can also sort of be a utility as well. You just get a big fuck-off satchel charge that does the single highest damage in the game. You can also carve out a massive area, so you can either use it to quickly level a place, quickly kill a huge swarm of enemies, or quickly wipe your team. Never, and I mean never, trust the Driller if he's walking around with a C4 in his hands. No matter what, that C4 will find its way into your life. And for his traversal tool, he is one of the most versatile. In a game that's all about working your way around the landscape, Driller cuts out the middleman and just shapes the landscape in his favor. And, as his name implies, he gets these two fuck-off drills that not only let you make massive tunnels in the blink of an eye, but will fill you with an unending sense of nostalgic unease as you try and remember what the fuck that LEGO game with the first-person mining was called, or if it even existed. It was LEGO Rock Raiders, by the way. You're welcome. Let's not forget the most important part about playing Driller, making straight lines directed to the drop pod for extraction. Nothing feels as satisfying as telling the entire level to go fuck itself once you've stripped it clean and don't need to walk around this whole maze anymore. Like all the other traversal tools, this can be used to great effect in combat because it allows you to turn a wide open encounter into a choke point by creating a little bunker on the side of a wall. This guy admittedly really doesn't have too many weaknesses overall. Range isn't his strong suit, but he still can do a more consistent job compared to the other classes. That is, with the exception of Scout. Scout is an incredibly helpful class who isn't exactly a massive powerhouse in himself, but he can completely round out a team and you will thank him. This guy comes armed to the teeth with support options and the ability to quickly take down high priority targets. His primaries are all high accuracy rifles with pretty good stopping power and decent ammo reserves. He has options that are a bit more lenient, giving you more flexibility, or a bit more strict like the M1000, which is much slower but rewards you with much harder hits. And given the look of this gun, I'm sure you know where this is going. His secondaries, on the other hand, help him deal close-range burst damage, or have some emergency crowd clearing. As for the grenades, he has some cool support options. The IFG is a long-lasting heavy slow that gives your team quite a bit of breathing room, especially in choke points. He also gets cryo grenades, which are inherently insane since freeze is 3 times the non-splash damage taken for enemies, and 1 grenade freezes 90% of the enemies instantly. The big boys take 2, and then it's just open season. But the next 2 tools are where things get really good. So Scout is a bit selfish. He doesn't have a traversal tool that the whole team can use, because he is the tool. He comes equipped with a grappling hook that can send you extreme distances and can even be used to cancel fall damage because gravity ignores you while you're being cool. This allows you to, well, scout. You can get to a high place for a vantage point or to see if there's anything up there, you can get minerals in the ceiling with the help of an NG, or you could just use it to escape combat or get to a high priority target faster. You have so much freedom with this thing that Scout can easily pull off some nasty clutches. And then for his last tool, which is easily the most important one in the game, the flare gun. Caves are pretty dark, that makes sense. The normal flares you have do the job when you just need to see something close by, but anything other than that, and it's pretty trash. But Scout has super flares that provide an immense amount of light for quite a while. This is incredibly useful for doing quick sweeps of a room to look for materials, and more importantly, gives you insane visual clarity when you're in combat. Trying to fight in only flare light is hell, but with Scout present, it's like the biggest damage buff in the game. Scout's motto is that faster is safer. The more hordes you fight, the more chances you have of messing up. At least, it is his motto until he flings himself into a leech and needs to be saved. And yeah, that was kind of a lot to go over, but for good reason. At this game's heart, it really is all about the classes and how you utilize them. The missions are all extremely straightforward, as I've mentioned before, and merely present you with various situations that you have to think your way around, which is where most of the fun is. I don't think you could reasonably convince anyone, except for hardcore Factorio players, that placing a really long pipe piece by piece is significantly stimulating. However, the light problem solving from getting these pipes to their destination in the most convenient way is pretty satisfying in itself. That said, while this game is greatly enjoyed in co-op, the solo mode isn't bad. You get a little combat drone who can do all the complicated mining and carrying of stuff while you work on staying alive or trying to solve problems with your class that would admittedly be much easier if you had someone else. It hits different and is enjoyable as its own thing, but it's definitely not as good as having a full party. Also, it's important to mention, you do have to have a level of tolerance for these sorts of activities to enjoy this game because unlike other games in the Left 4 Dead adjacent pantheon, this game is usually mostly quiet. It definitely depends on the mission where some are higher octane than others, but I've straight up had a mission go on for about 15 minutes before the first horde even attacked me. Though that was more of an outlier. This game does go back and forth with its consistency, which I kinda like because you never really know how far a mission will go to try and ream you. While I've had missions that were mostly empty, I've also had a mission that started off with everything under the sun waiting for us at the drop pod, and it does not let up for at least half the mission. This inconsistency also applies to a few enemies and hazard types, which can keep things fresh since you never really know when to expect them. Cave leeches are pretty easy to deal with normally, and they have a decent enough tail, and with Scout you can see them before they ever become a problem. However, the fact that you see one maybe every 3 missions makes you forget about them regularly. Or at least I do. And those bastards always get the jump on me because I just stop expecting them. I do still look up for them based off muscle memory, but they always seem to be there the moment I forget. There's also quite a few rare events that can happen. Occasionally you'll find a mini-boss, a rare high-valued material, or just a swarm modifier that changes what spawns. The latter being the rarest. Only once in my hundreds of hours in this game have I ever seen this, but you can actually have a dreadnought from the elimination missions invade you. The enemies aren't the only hazards you have to worry about. Each biome not only has their own layout, but they also have various obstacles that you have to deal with every now and then. Special weather conditions that obscure visibility, special status effects, or even unique forms of dangerous terrain like fire pits or radioactive crystals. And as far as the difficulty in this game is concerned, I'd say it's pretty well done. The way this game is set up, it allows for pretty comfortable communicationless teamwork, where if everyone just does their job to an acceptable level and is mildly cognizant of the other players, then you can largely cruise until the game throws an extra double fisting of fuck you. The top two difficulties offer a good balance of go fuck yourself and chill. I play almost exclusively on Hazard 4 and generally you will succeed, but there are times where it gets sketchy enough to keep things interesting. Hazard 5 is definitely a fair bit harder. It swarms you pretty hard with some painful enemies, so you gotta be on your game a fair bit more, but overall it's still not too ball busting. It's a nice spot of challenge I dabble into with the deep dives that I will get into later. So once you've finished a mission, what do? Well, from there you can work on purchasing upgrades for your weapons or getting cosmetics for your character with the money and materials you've gained. But don't let all these resources and upgrades fool you into thinking there's really much of a grind here. There thankfully isn't. Even when you start getting into the really resource and money heavy crafting, you still gain gold and materials at a good rate. You might always be hungry for materials, but you're never really starved of them. The only annoying part is when you need materials from a biome that isn't on rotation. I'm actually shocked at how well paced the material economy is. Another part of the grind is a more recent addition that was introduced with the current update. These are seasons. In essence, it's literally just a battle pass with some extra progression you can make by doing whatever new content they added with that update. And before you say anything, this battle pass is completely free with absolutely no rewards being exclusive to it, and no way to fast track it either. Any rewards it has will be redistributed back into the game for other players to find at a later date. Overall, I really like this. It's just that little extra bit of direction for what you can play to speed things up a bit, while largely just being a set of bonuses you passively get by playing the game normally. The sheer lack of pressure it puts on you, from my perspective at least, is really refreshing. That said, it's definitely still a slow burn. I've played on and off for the better part of 2.5 weeks, and I'm only really 1/4 to 1/3 of the way through. Going back to the upgrades, however, they're largely unimpressive choices you can make. You have a few rows of perks that range from things like trading damage for extra ammo, or getting things like extra accuracy if you feel you need it. The really impactful upgrades are usually the last two tiers, which tend to add more powerful or mechanically different bonuses, like converting half your damage to heat status, or giving strong conditional damage bonuses. You also have passives, which are definitely nice, but again, not super insane. They range from specific benefits to more general ones, with the more general the upgrade, the weaker its effect. Two perks come to mind. One provides you with double the base storage capacity for minerals, which is a pretty big bonus, but overall it's not that huge. It just saves time overall. Now contrast that with 12% movement speed, but only if you've been sprinting for 4 seconds straight. Or 30% reduced elemental damage taken, only to find out that very little stuff actually deals substantial elemental damage and it only really affects environmental hazards or a few damage over time effects. Don't get me wrong, they are still nice, but ultimately kind of a low impact, save for a few in some specific situations. The active perks, however, are much nicer and have a really nice impact. These all provide some kind of ability that will go on a long cooldown and may or may not have limited uses. You can straight up convert a single normal glyphid into becoming an ally, which gives you some nice extra damage and a distraction. You can temporarily revive yourself once per mission, and if you can heal yourself in that time, you don't go back down, which can save games. Some of them even have passive effects to go along with their active effects that can be really nice, like this perk that lets you instantly revive someone once per mission, but it also gives you 30% extra revive speed and makes enemies run away when you revive someone. You get one of these active perks by default, but once you hit level 25 on a class, you can then promote them, which resets you back to level 1, though you don't lose anything, and it gives you a second perk slot. If that's your first dwarf promoted, you also get access to the last bit of content and a whole suite of upgrades. When it comes to the normal missions, you can now access the machine events on your own. If you ever saw these contraptions next to a metal box and wondered what these are for, this is it. Which admittedly is really annoying that it doesn't tell you that you need to promote. When I was just a wee green beard, I spent 30 minutes just looking for the item to start this before someone joined and turned it on. These are all challenge events, which not only grant bonus rewards upon completion, but if you have blank matrix cores, you can either put an overclock or unique cosmetic on it and then craft it later. To get the blank cores, as well as the overclocks and cosmetics, you can do the 2 daily missions. First one is a set of 3 assignments, which grants you a blank, an overclock, and a cosmetic. You can also do the deep dives to get access to them. The deep dives are a series of 3 mini missions that get progressively harder as you go in, at least hazard level wise, since the mix of objectives and warnings can make some stages way harder than the others. Ideally, each stage is supposed to be a shortened version of the missions they borrow from. Instead of needing to grab anywhere between 200 and 350 Morkite, you only need about 150. Or you'll need up to 3 eggs instead of up to 8 eggs. But unfortunately, with the newer and more complex missions, it basically has you do the entire mission, which can take a really long time if you end up getting multiple back-to-back. One bright side of these missions is that they are a consistent seed for the entire week, so if you fail it once, everything will pretty much be in the exact same spot. It also allows you to read up on what to expect from any mini-boss encounters or noteworthy resources to collect ahead of time. The deep dives are actually split up into 2 categories, both with their own rewards. The Elite Deep Dive is its own seed and set of missions, with the only real difference being it starts out and ends on a higher hazard level. So, now that you've done a deep dive and have some overclocks, it's time to talk about them. These are far and away the strongest customization upgrades you can have. There are 3 tiers. One is just small boosts, the next involve bigger boosts or potentially new mechanics, but with a downside, and the last can completely skew a weapon into one playstyle or give it a significantly different mechanic at the cost of some major downsides. While many of them aren't particularly good, admittedly, either because the stats they add are extremely mediocre or the mechanic isn't very balanced, these can be good fun, and there's plenty of stupid ideas. Like one unstable overclock for the minigun that makes it so you have god-awful accuracy no matter what you do, but the bullets have a 50% chance of ricocheting off enemies, floors, or walls into other enemies. Or another unstable overclock for the dual machine pistols that deletes your direct damage and max ammo capacity, but instead makes each shot place embedded explosives that go off when you reload. The unstable ones are usually my favorite for their weird mechanics, but you really can't go wrong with an overclock that just allows you to take one aspect of a weapon just a little bit further. Like this overclock for the rocket launcher that helps me make it into an even better crowd clearing monster with high explosive radius. Though my absolute favorite overclock has to be the special powder for the Scout's double barrel. It's a clean overclock, so it has no downside other than letting you do this. You can even kill yourself by firing it straight up while jumping an inch off the ground. And believe me, I have definitely done this on accident. The overclocks also help make the various normal upgrades on weapons just a little bit more interesting, since it goes from basic min-maxing of the weapon's normal traits to trying to either exploit what the overclock does harder, or make up for what it takes away. The primary reason I really didn't take these into account when going over the classes is because of how long it can be before you even get them, let alone a good one or the one you want. Unless you focus on one dwarf, it'll take ages to get that first promotion, and outside of the initial bolus of cores, you can only get them from the weekly missions. The absolute max amount of overclocks you can get is between 7 and 10, and with 124 and rising, I have most of Gunner's overclocks, and I still don't have the ones that I want. Really, that's my only actual complaint about this game that isn't just a mild annoyance. Because man, I could go on and on about how much I love all the little bits and bobs about this game. Say you bet your ass I will. First, this game looks amazing actually. It's such a simple look with everything made out of harsh angles and flat surfaces, with all things considered extremely minimal texturing that makes everything look like the carpet of a 90s bowling alley. But they use the minimal geometry to pack models with so much physical detail. Everything on the weapons and gadgets sticks out because they just put so much emphasis on the shapes of them. The heavier weapons that Driller and Gunner have are cluttered in such a way that it really sells the fact that these are high-tech and heavy as all fuck pieces of machinery. And while the environments do lack that same detail, there is another thing going for them, and that's the lighting. The colorful lighting really carries a large part of this game's visual appeal. Even in the more detailed areas like the space rig, the lighting just makes everything stand out so much more. From the soft and colorful lighting surrounding the abyss bar to make it that one nice and cozy spot they can call home, to the light shining through the crack in the planet being the major light source for this place. And yeah, it's time to talk about the fucking bar now. This is easily my favorite part of this game because of how much effort they put into making it a fun place, a good mechanic, and just really solid flavor. What do dwarves like more than mining? Beer! So of course management would have to include a bar in the space rig for the dwarves. Naturally, the beer does get you quite drunk if you drink enough of it, and some beers are stronger than others. It's even possible to get so drunk you pass out. If you're an extra madman, you could even start the mission extremely drunk, making it almost impossible to see things clearly. There's absolutely no benefit to doing this, but it's funny, and that is the best reason. But if you want to be a little bitch and not go to a mission drunk, you can order the Leaf Lovers Special. I love this because it's a bit of company-mandated diversity, where they have beer made by elves, who are unaffectionately called leaf lovers, and it's so weak compared to the beer that the dwarves drink that it actually sobers you up. But that's still not the best part about this. The beers themselves are also great. You do have your standard beers that you buy with credits and get you drunk, but there's also the daily special that provides a pretty helpful buff. Anything from more HP, reduced fall damage that actually allows scouts to take 0 fall damage, faster power attack recharge. It's nice. Sometimes you even get the rare pots of gold, which doubles the amount of gold you mine. Other beers don't provide any benefits, but they are all gags. I don't want to spoil what they all do, but here's just one example.
Rock and stone, yeah!
I love the bar so much that a few years back, I took the time to manually experiment with how intoxication is built up in Deep Rock Galactic in order to get the perfect amount of drunk before a mission, since I couldn't find any information on this elsewhere. A lot of it turned out to be fairly inaccurate value-wise, even if it was still roughly accurate in practice. However, since then it has been fully corrected by people using actual in-game data. This is my legacy, and I am proud of it. Now I'll talk about the single most ingenious idea this game has. Let's talk about the rock and stone button. But to truly understand the rock and stone button, I need to give a science lesson for those unfamiliar with the concept of a positive feedback loop. In a positive feedback loop in action, it will generate a specific response, which then stimulates a series of responses that feed back into the initial triggering response. This creates a continuous self-repeating loop of action. So, once a dwarf lays eyes on another, their optic nerves will trigger the release of dopamine into the synapse, almost to an overloading degree. To relieve some of this excess excitement, the dwarf will call out a mighty salute to all those in his vicinity. Despite not seeing the other dwarf, hearing the phrase rock and stone will compulsively trigger the other dwarfs to reply to this call with a salute of their own. This can create what is commonly known to ants as a death spiral, in which case a group of dwarves can very well salute each other until their own demise. Thankfully, this is virtually non-existent, as the stimulus to break this chain is remembering that there are more bugs to squish. This also isn't exclusive to the phrase rock and stone.
We're rich. There's Eno Pearl here. We're rich. Found an Eno. We're rich. Eno Pearl here. Look over here. None can stand before us. Rock and stone, everyone.
It is incredible how collectively in sync everyone suddenly becomes when someone hits the rock and stone button. Between that and the so bad it's good voice acting where every class is the same guy but pitch shifted, it gives this game an incredibly lighthearted tone that just encourages people to act like absolute dipshits at the slightest drop of a hat. That's one thing I seriously have to commend this game for fostering, because this game truly has an amazing community. Even if we lose a 35-minute long mission and you could clearly blame someone, the worst you'll get is silence and quietly leaving, but sometimes you'll even get an apology, a round of beer, and encouragement to try again. Normally I wouldn't point out a community, but it's truly special how kind and engaging the Deep Rock Galactic community is. The community is also so deep in the silly shit that the devs have made it so you can pet basically every non-hostile entity in this game. Random friendly bug? Pet. Hacker drone? Pet. Also you can salute him too. A giant autonomous drill unit? Pat pat motherfucker. The biggest uproar I've seen in this game came with the newer mission with that drill. When you finished it, the drill was just abandoned, and people got too attached to the machine and its adorable noises that the devs, like within 2 days, added a mechanic where the head of the drill gets ejected, and you have the option to risk jeopardizing the mission to carry it back to the drop pod for absolutely no reward other than it shows up on the mission complete screen. And every single party I have ever been in has done it every time, no matter what. I have seen people go headfirst into a flood of glyphids to retrieve this unit, and it's glorious. Really, the level of camaraderie has almost become a game mechanic in and of itself. In Deep Rock Galactic, you never leave a dwarf behind. The best way to get people to abandon everything and risk failing a mission at the very end is to remind people you died and by saying leave me. Even in this mission with low oxygen, the driller told us to leave him, but I refused and went all the way to the other side of this cave to go save him and bring him back with 20 seconds to spare before the pod left us all. The whole team also came back for him and we saved at most 300 credits for the survivor bonus, but god damn it, if I can't come home and drink with my fellow dwarf, I'm not coming home at all. And another thing I like is how immersive this game can be. So much information is diegetic that you can largely turn off the majority of the UI and still have all the information you could want. I haven't found this game to be that intense that I needed this information to be as accurate as possible, so I like to keep it minimal. And really at this point the only tidbit I have to talk about is that there is official mod support for this game hosted by mod.io and it functions similar to the Steam Workshop. There's a few caveats like some mods disabling progression but allowing you to play with everyone, some require you to be in a specific modded realm, and others being perfectly fine. It's great that it's there and there's quite a bit of fun mods to try, but the biggest reason I bring this up is that someone convinced the devs to add support for VR mods, so there's now one in the works. I was trying my hardest to wait for that mod to come out as well as the next updates so I can include that into this review, but I just had to talk about this game now. This game is just too good. But you can bet your ass I am looking at it intently. So, as Deep Rock Galactic, this game is, simply put, incredible in nearly every way. I cannot say enough good about this game, and every update they come out with, no matter how small or large, always manages to capture me for weeks at a time. And as of this video, it's on Game Pass, so if you own Game Pass, you have no excuse. So, for now, I'm gonna leave you with a glimpse of my favorite mod, because I am a fucking child.